World War, America, for a long time, we were the dominant power. And especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, around 1990, we believed, and in many ways it was true, that we had reached a kind of unipolar world, a world in which everything was going to revolve around the United States and our interests and our benefit, our power, our privileges, and that's changing. And it's changing, as the result of very deep historical processes. The diffusion of modern productive technologies, the ability of China to be innovative and creative, the simple the simple accumulation of experience and frankly of wealth through the hard work of people, not just in China, in many countries around the world. It's redistributing wealth and to some extent power around the planet, and the American elites, unfortunately, can only see that as a threat to their power and their privileges and the continuation of their dominant role in world affairs. And it's that the American elites are intentionally, willfully fostering these negative views about China, putting out information which I think they basically know isn't accurate, isn't real, but perpetuating these ideas about China that make it very hard for Americans, ordinary Americans, to understand, to appreciate what's going on over there.
Well, everybody, I want to welcome you to a very exciting live stream. My name is Cyrus Shanson, and of course, the topic of today's discussion is going to be the relationship between the two superpowers in the world, the United States and China. I want to thank you all for joining this very important live stream. As we continue to see this relationship evolve, it really is very interesting because for the past 3 years, I've been here on YouTube, and I have been, as my friend Alex from Reporterify Media says, kind of an advocate of peace, an ambassador for peace, and someone that is trying to build bridges, someone that is trying to help people understand that certainly conflict is not the best part of our relationship. It's not the best for the future, and of course, and conflict would be just a devastating result for the future of mankind, not just the future of China and the United States, but literally the future of every single human being on this planet. And so I think it's really important that, again, we have opportunities like this on YouTube to voice our concern, to hopefully change the direction. And I started today's live stream with this clip from Professor Ken Hammond, who is from, I believe, New Mexico State University. He is a professor that has done extensive studies on Asian studies. He is a unbelievable professor that has a tremendous amount of insights. And I wanted to start today's live stream with that clip because I think what he hit on is a very big part of the equation, if you will, when we talk about, the potential for war between the United States and China. And that essentially is we look back in history. I mean, I actually sent out this graphic in a tweet earlier this week. And this is one of the most amazing photos that I've ever seen. And this is a photo of Shenzhen. And this is what we've seen in China happen over the last 40 years. We've seen this incredible transformation. And I mean, honestly, there is no better example of a transformation that can happen like the city of Shenzhen. Obviously, you see that in 1984. I was born December 26, 83. So this is just after I was born. You can see, I mean, basically nothing. I mean, it's absolutely nothing there. A few villagers up there, just some common people with some umbrellas having a look at the beautiful, vast open land there in Shenzhen. Of course, 40 years ago, this was just a fishing village of 20,000 people. And when I shared this was quite interesting. I shared this on Twitter. It got a lot of thousands of likes and comments. And one of the interesting one was there was a man from Hong Kong that commented, and he said, Cyrus, I was doing business in Hong Kong in the mid '80s, and I remember going to Shenzhen, and I met with one of the communist government officials, and he said, this city within 10 to 15 years, we're going to have around 10 million people are going to be living in this city. We are going to transform Shenzhen into this tech hub. It is going to be, a standard for China. It is going to be really a blueprint for the future development of China. And he said, Cyrus, I have to be honest with you. When this government official told me that, again, I'm from Hong Kong. I'm like, you're full of nonsense. Like, there's no way that you're going to be able to do this. And of course, here he is in 2023, looking at this photo and commenting on my Twitter and saying, he was completely right. I mean, they absolutely predicted exactly what was going to happen. They had this blueprint, and it's incredible. I mean, you now look at Shenzhen; it has a GDP that is larger than both Guangzhou and Hong Kong. I mean, and I think it's number 2 in the world as far as number of skyscrapers. It's obviously the Silicon Valley of China. Very much rivaling our own Silicon Valley here in the United States. And this is what we've seen. I mean, this is the interesting thing, right? In 1984, China was not a threat, if you will, as Westerners like to say, or as American politicians like to say. It was very much, trying to, help. There was obviously the United States poured a lot of capital investment into China. China needed that investment. China needed to work with foreign countries. I mean, we go back in history. Obviously, it was we're around 50 years of celebrating, the official relationship between, the United States and China, Canada and China, right around 1971, 72 is when a formal diplomatic relation started for these two countries. And that certainly helped China grow. And the interesting thing is what I always, admire about China is this incredible planning, and the interesting thing, and I'm going to start off with something that I often hear a tremendous amount of U.S. politicians make a mistake, and obviously a lot of these anti-China haters that they constantly make this mistake. They say the reason that China has risen so much in the past 40, 50 years is because of the strong will of the people, right? Their argument is that this has nothing to do with the Chinese government, right? Basically, the Chinese people are hardworking, they're ambitious, they're incredible visionaries, etc., whatever you want to say. But they basically want to give no credit to the Chinese government at all for this. And essentially, in their minds, this entire economic rise has come as a result of the people, and basically they've been able to do it despite the Chinese government being there. That's their point. Now, I'm going to completely argue against that because, again, you go back to this photo, and you cannot separate those two. I mean, obviously, China's government has had a tremendous amount of responsibility in the planning of this. I mean, of course, it was the Chinese government that said, look, we're going to turn Shenzhen into a special economic zone. We are going to, try this capitalism. We are going to allow certain policies to happen in Shenzhen that is going to allow this to boom, right? How do you go from 20,000 people to 20 million people plus now? Obviously, it comes from strategic planning from the government and a vision from that government. And you can say what you like about the Communist Party. I'm not here trying to say, wow, China's government is amazing. I'm just saying, you got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, we cannot simply say that, oh, China's government has had nothing to do with the rise of China. That's a completely inaccurate take. And I think what's interesting is, and you go back to that clip of Dr. Ken Hammond, and you see, his insights into, okay, what we're seeing is a very big shift, right? After the fall of, after World War II, I mean, there is no doubt about it. The United States was the leader of the world. I mean, by a long shot. And the United States did some amazing things. I mean, it was, in fact, the United States that basically gave all of these monies and loans to Western European countries. I mean, countries like Germany, which was absolutely devastated by the war, France, England. I mean, United States, we built back Europe. I mean, and that was really the boom of this industrial age in America, where again, I've talked to I remember when Alex from Reporter Fry Media and I, we had Peter Schiff on our show a couple of months ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And, he said, he said, guys, this is the problem, right? In the 40s and 50s, 60s, we made everything in America, right? We manufactured everything, right? Whether it's cameras or equipment or cars, everything was manufactured in America. That was the boom. And what we've seen is we've just seen this very big strategic shift over the past couple of decades. And going back to Ken Hammond's comment, even after 1990, after the fall of the Soviet Union, again, you would still say the United States was the supreme power in the world. Certainly China in 1990 was nowhere near what it is today. I mean, China was not really even in that equation. I mean, you go back to 1990. I mean, Shanghai, I mean, and the entire Pudong side was still, farmland. I mean, there was no buildings, there was no skyscrapers over there. The beautiful Pudong skyline, which, by the way, I'll be seeing very soon. More on that later in the live stream. But that entire section of the city, Pudong, didn't exist in 1990, right? I mean, this is, again, here's that strategic planning from China and saying, look, we're going to build the Oriental Pearl TV Tower. That's the first building that we're going to build on the Pudong side. That's going to be an economic symbol, and how we're going to open up Shanghai and really, build a stock market here, attract capital investment, build business here. Again, a very much a policy from the government and a vision for them to create that. And so, again, we've seen this dramatic shift. And the incredible thing is that I always want people to understand. I mean, we and it's interesting now that I live back in the United States, and a lot of people ask me every day on YouTube, Cyrus, how could you go back to the United States? Why do you want to live there? I mean, at the end of the day, I am American. I mean, it is my home country. It is a good country. I do enjoy living here. And that being said, I think there is, positives and negatives as well. One is I'm a family man. My parents are, here in the United States. As they're getting older in their age, I want to be here. But I feel that it's very important, as someone that works very passionately about improving the United States and China relationship, that I reside, in the country that really needs to hear a more balanced message about China. And that most certainly is the United States. I mean, it's incredible, the bubble that 99.99% of Americans live in, and just how little information we get outside of these borders. I mean, most people, unless you have an interest in it and really go out and independently seek that information, you have no idea what's going on outside of the U.S. borders. Nothing. And that is just the way that our system is. And that is a little bit of this American exceptionalism. The fact that in America, we're always taught we're number one, we're the best. Why do we need to learn about other countries? We're USA all the way. That very much is the mentality here, which is something that I certainly, I'm not on board with. I want to be more of a world citizen. It's certainly something, for example, with my 3 children, that I want to be teaching them. Look, you're half Chinese. I want you to be proud of that. Actually, their last name, we have a double last name. We have both my wife's surname and myself, my surname in their last name. It's Wang Jansen. We want to make sure that they embrace their Chinese heritage, that they're proud of being ethnically Chinese. It's a great responsibility. We want them to speak Chinese. We want them to be proud of their roots, that certainly also go back to China and also come back to America. So again, it's these amazing interactions that we can have, that, it's hopefully, and I always want to say this, I mean, we're coming up to already about 1,000 people on the live stream. Guys, if you are just joining in, I want to thank you all for being here. We've got an important stream, and we're talking about things that are really going to affect everybody in the entire world. That is the future of the United States and China relationship. And I think it is these interactions that we can have. And it's something that I want to say, because being back in the United States, I have been able to have just so many conversations with people. And I tell people what I do, right? I'm on YouTube. I make geopolitical videos. I talk about the United States-China relationship. I have yet to find an American citizen that I cannot sit down and have a reasonable conversation with. And, most Americans are very open to learning about China. Instantly, when I say, hey, I used to live in China for 10 years, I speak Chinese, I have a little bit of a different perspective, it kind of gives me some street cred. It's like, oh, wow, here's this guy that lived in China for 10 years. Tell me what China's really like, and, I've talked to people that are very Republican, very anti-China, and I find common ground with them. I find that I find some common ground, and I'm able to speak to them very rationally and just kind of share with them my experiences. And, 10 times out of 10, they're able to come away and having a little bit more of a nuanced insight into China, which I think is just so powerful and positive. Again, that's why I enjoy being back here in the United States, because it's these one-on-one interactions that, eventually do help people, see the light. And I've got a lot of slides that I want to show you in today's presentation, but I'm going to show you, and we're going to start off with this, because this is something that's really interesting. And this is, I'm going to give a huge shout out to SL Canthan. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you can see that in the bottom left of your screen. He is an Indian national. He talks about India, China, geopolitics. Very good follow on Twitter. One of my favorite follows on Twitter. He runs a Substack newsletter as well. And he just sent this out this week. And I think this is a very incredible metric that really needs to be discussed. I mean, I don't need to go through them. You guys can read them on your screen. But I mean, we look at like here are 25 plus metrics in which China is already number one in the world. I mean, we look at GDP, right? The top left, PPP GDP, that's purchase power parity. I mean, already China is, China's GDP measured in that terms is already larger than the United States. I mean, we look at manufacturing, exports. I mean, you look at the size of the middle class. I mean, that's been a huge thing for China, right? Lifting 800 million people out of poverty into the middle class. I mean, this is huge. I'm doing a video on this soon, is the EV. I mean, BYD is dominating. I mean, forget Tesla. China is dominating, absolutely dominating the EV space right now. You look at the solar power. I mean, incredible. I think it's something 80-90% of our solar panels in the United States are coming from China. I mean, they are leading in patents. STEM. I mean, it's absolutely incredible how many STEM graduates are coming through in China. And I mean, and you start looking at all of these things. I mean, I want to skip down and go to 5G. I think the Chinese government has invested around $180 billion into R&D into 5G since around 2014. I mean, $180 billion. There's a reason why China is the number one 5G country in the world. And again, there you go with that argument, well, China's rise has nothing to do with the communist government. Well, give credit where credit's due. I mean, if they're investing in that and they're leading that research, there is a reason why they are doing that, why they are leading the way. And that's why, the 5G network is superior in China more than anywhere else in the world. You look at, obviously, high-speed railways, incredible manufacturing. So, I mean, the list goes on. But I thought that was an amazing insight. And it shows you, and this is something that I try to do. I try to really help people understand this because over the last few months, I've been making a lot of videos here on YouTube. And for example, there was one video where I mentioned that China has already won the tech race against the United States. Now, sometimes people criticize me and they say, Cyrus, why are you taking an anti-American stance? It's not anti-American. What it is it's simply a factual stance. I'm looking at a report, ironically, from ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which normally, is a very anti-China, very hawkish think tank from Australia. But at the end of the day, when you have to look at, you're looking at facts, you can't ignore facts. And they're looking at, there are around 44 different areas of technology that are going to be crucial for the future of our world. And I think China basically has a commanding lead in around 37 of those 44 technologies. And the thing that's amazing from this report is it says in some of the areas, China's lead is so large that even if the United States were to, double production for the next decade, they're not going to be able to catch up. And so this is an area where, and you see this kind of in United States policy, right? We see our politicians coming out with verbiage saying, we need to contain China. We need to stop the rise of China. We need to cut them off and basically contain them. Now, for me, I think it's incredible because, first of all, why would you want to limit the progress of, one of the most populous countries in the world? I think right now, India might have overtaken China. I mean, they're neck and neck as far as population, but obviously China for decades has been the most populous country in the world. Regardless, I mean, there's well over 1.4 billion people in China. And again, this has been this economic progression, for China is, that's been the story of China, right? Is how do we lift people out of poverty into the middle class? And again, it is through this investment in technology. It is this strategic planning in building these cities, connecting them through the high-speed rail. We'll go on another thing. A lot of people are critical of China's high-speed rail. They say, well, Cyrus, China's high-speed rail is billions of dollars in debt, which is true. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It certainly, there is a very initial cost, which is tremendous because China's goal is to make sure that every city, I believe that every city in China that has a population of at least 500,000 people. Now you have to imagine, this is China. 500,000 people is a relatively large city in the United States. That's nothing in China. That's a very small, almost a village, to be honest. I mean, it's a very small, city or town, if you will, in China. But they want to have every city of at least 500,000 people connected to their network of high-speed rail. What that does is that really does open up future business opportunities. And the thing is this high-speed rail it's not going anywhere. I mean, it's going to be there from 20, 30, 40 years from now. And so what you need to look at, and there's no better example than if you look at the cities of Shanghai and Suzhou, right? These are two very big cities, but they are connected by a high-speed rail. I remember being in China. Actually, my very first train that I ever took was in 2007. It was, I think it was January or February 2007. It was Chinese New Year, Year of the Pig, which is my sign. And I remember, being in China for about 6 weeks at the time. My boss said, "Hey, you got a few days holiday," and I went down to the train station and I traveled and I bought a ticket from Shanghai to Suzhou, and I believe that journey was about an hour and 10 minutes, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. It was extremely slow. And now, I mean, I think it's 27 minutes, bullet train. And what that does is it allows people, you could literally live in Suzhou and work in Shanghai. I mean, a 27-minute commute on a high-speed rail is nothing. And what it does is it has absolutely boomed the economic development between these two cities. Very similar between Tianjin and Beijing, right? Another two major cities up in the north that it essentially, kind of creates almost one mega city, in some ways because of this economic development. So yes, there certainly is a cost to developing high-speed rails. Is it going to be profitable from day one? No, not every rail line is, but what is that going to look, 20, 30 years from now? How is that going to help China's economic progress? That is the one thing that I think we always need to look at in China is the fact that, Chinese government is always planning 5, 10, 15 years into the future. They have a very big strategic, vision for what they're wanting to do for the country. And I think that is, very much been the China story, right? That has been this economic rise. And what I really want to point out, and this is what I often do, is I want to make sure that as Americans, we are not missing the mark here. And there is a very interesting survey from the Pew Research Center. And I'm going to show you this survey, then we're going to take a little break. I'm going to look at some comments here. You guys are at 1,300 people in the stream. Thank you so much for spending today, Sunday, with me here on YouTube. Time is our most valuable asset. Thank you for giving it to me. We're going to have a great show, as we already are. But have a look at this data here, because I think this is actually quite shocking here. So this is from the Pew Research. And again, the reason why I bring these stats up is, again, is it really helps people understand. And this is my biggest message is if the United States continues to contain China and go down this pathway of a war with China, this is going to be very alarming, because this is what's happening right now. This is the current economic state in the United States. Just 19% of U.S. adults rate current economic conditions as excellent or good, while 46% say are fair and 35% rate the economy as poor. So you can look at this, and this is actually a very interesting graph, because you can look at certainly, the Republicans are in the red. You can see when Donald Trump was president, the Republicans very happy about the economy, very optimistic about the future. I mean, almost 81% of Republicans right around 2020, felt very optimistic and positive about the nature of the U.S. economy. Now, of course, a huge dip that was obviously because of COVID, and we see certainly the recovery that happened. And then again, another, I mean, this is really 2022. I mean, we're looking at really the, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Certainly Joe Biden, who has not, in my opinion, has not been a very successful president for the United States. I mean, it's really been very difficult, but across the board, I mean, you're looking at, 10%. I mean, look at that. 81% of Republicans in 2020, now down to 10%. I mean, that is a huge drop for the Republicans. Democrats, I mean, basically consistent. I mean, they've always kind of felt pessimistic, but let's go back to 2016, 46%, now down to 28%. But the average is 19%. They're only 19%, only 1 out of 5 of Americans would feel that the economy is in a good spot right now. I mean, you've got 80% of Americans that are basically saying, we're not very positive about the future of our economy. And so, again, this is where, I'm worried for America. And this is where, as an American citizen, I'm quite concerned, because it's like, hey, are we looking out for our own best interest, or is this contain China policy actually weakening our own country? Right? We're going to go for more data here. Okay. So this is an interesting one, because this is a survey that is actually very common in China. And this is something that for many years, many Chinese, for example, when you ask them, do you think your life will be better, 5 years from now? Actually, very interesting enough, if you go back, you can look at a YouTube video I did about 6 weeks ago, about 4 to 6 weeks ago, where I highlighted, I forgot which it was. I forgot there was an amazing survey that, again, was from a Western institution. And again, China in 2023, it led the world in this question where it said, do you feel optimistic about your life? Do you feel optimistic that do you think you'll be living a better life within 5 years' time? And out of all the countries surveyed, I think they surveyed around 30 to 35 countries around the world. Most of them are Western countries. Um, you know, Basically, the United States is on a decline. Most Americans right now are saying, no, I don't feel that we're going to be better in 5 years' time. Whereas China, the survey indicates, yes, we do. We do feel that we're going to be more optimistic. So again, this is the same thing. 46% of the public in America are now saying we believe that economic conditions will worsen in the next year. Okay, 61% of Republicans, again, but basically both parties, regardless of political affiliation, are feeling more pessimistic about the future of the American economy. We look at some of the concerning issues here, right? Again, this is, across the board. I mean, 72% of people are worried about basic things like the cost of food and consumer goods. I mean, here in the United States, our inflation is through the roof. The cost of food is astronomical right now. I mean, it is very expensive to go out to a restaurant. I mean, just simple things, going to a grocery store. I mean, go to a grocery store, grab a 2-pack of chicken, it's $12, $13. I mean, it's, how does the average American family, how do they afford that? If you're a situation like myself with 3 children, putting food on the table every night, I mean, it becomes a big deal for many Americans here. And this is where I'm very critical of my American politicians, saying, look, this is the issues that you guys need to be focusing on, right? I mean, the 2 biggest issues, right? Price of food, price of goods, cost of housing. Cost of housing's through the roof right now. But this is really the most telling sign here. This is really a huge red flag, in my opinion, a huge red flag. And this is 77% of Americans say the economic system in the United States unfairly favors powerful interests, while just 23% say the economic system is generally fair to most Americans. If that's not a red flag for the United States politicians, I don't know what is. And I mean, and it's not actually, and it actually doesn't really, it hasn't really changed much, right? I mean, if you go back to April 2019, you can see here unfavorably favors the powerful interest. That means 71%. I mean, that's still 7 out of 10 Americans. I mean, this is 4 years ago, 7 out of 10. Now we're approaching 8 out of 10. I mean, it's only getting worse. And this is what we're seeing is, and this is where I'm very highly critical, because we're seeing an unbelievable amount of these tensions that are rising between the United States and China. And I think it was excuse me, it was several very prominent speakers. It was Kishore Kinabalu from Singapore. He came out and said, look, in the future, we're going to have, again, tensions are going to rise. But, he says, the United States and our politicians, unfortunately, is largely going to be, the instigator here, right? The United States continues to do this. It was Ray Dalio had a very similar message where he said, I don't think that these tensions are going to lead to a war, but it is certainly going to lead to more drama. It's certainly going to lead to more tensions, and it's going to we're just keep escalating. Now, of course, the entire issue that surrounds the United States and China question, will the U.S. and China go to war? This entire question revolves around Taiwan. I mean, it absolutely, that is the key metric here. And a couple of weeks ago, I made a video specifically talking about Taiwan. And I had a very interesting insight, because I think what we need to understand is that the reason that Taiwan has become the main issue between the United States and China actually has nothing to do with Taiwan. Okay, that's a very important point for everybody to understand. Basically, nothing has changed in Taiwan, right? Taiwan has basically been the same. It's been the same. That there's nothing strategically has happened in Taiwan. It's just the fact that our relationship between the U.S. and China is at a low point, and therefore Taiwan has become a major issue between the two. We're going to let's rewind the clocks. When I go back to when I was in China for many years. I mean, Taiwan. I mean, interesting enough, in 2007 when I first went, there was no direct flights between mainland China and Taiwan, right? In order to go there, you had to fly either through Hong Kong or Macau, or certainly another Asian country would have been fine. But there was no direct flights. And one of the things that's very interesting is you have to remember is if you go back and you study your history, Xi Jinping, was in the Fujian province for 19 years. In his ascension to the president of China, which by the way took him 37 years from the time he entered the Communist Party to the time that he became the president of China, he worked his way up the political party. I mean, that's how China's system works. You do not have this fast ascension. You cannot kind of come out of nowhere a la Donald Trump in 2016 and just magically become president of China. You have to have a proven track record. It takes you decades, many decades, minimum of 3 decades in order to do that. And in order to do that, hold on, I need a little timeout here. Got my kids calling here. Let me attend to them real quick. I'm going to play that clip from Ken Hammond. But what we're going to talk about is, let me come back to this. We're going to look at Taiwan. Let me go ahead and play. I'm going to play you that clip from Ken Hammond again. It's about 2 minutes long, and I'll be right back.
Since the end of the Second World War, America, for a long time, we were the dominant power, and especially after the fall of the Soviet Union around 1990, we believed, and in many ways it was true, that we had reached a kind of unipolar world, a world in which everything was going to revolve around the United States and our interests and our benefit, our power, our privileges, and that's changing. And it's changing, as the result of very deep historical processes. The diffusion of modern productive technologies, the ability of China to be innovative and creative, the simple accumulation of experience and frankly of wealth through the hard work of people, not just in China, in many countries around the world. It's redistributing wealth and to some extent power around the planet, and the American elites, unfortunately, can only see that as a threat to their power and their privileges and the continuation of their dominant role in world affairs. And it's that the American elites are intentionally, willfully fostering these negative views about China, putting out information which I think they basically know isn't accurate, isn't real, but perpetuating these ideas about China that make it very hard for Americans, ordinary Americans, to understand, to appreciate what's going on over there.
All right. Well, thank you for my little break here. I am a dad, and dad duties call. Had to attend to the little ones. So going back to, I'm glad that you guys, so if you're just joining the stream now, that is a fantastic insight from Ken Hammond, a professor at New Mexico State University, who basically hits the nail on the head, in my opinion, really talks about, why this tension between the United States and China continues to rise. And again, I'm going to go back to my point, talking specifically about Taiwan. And that the incredible thing is that, again, the main issue here is that Taiwan has become a problem because of the fallout of the United States and China relationship. That's the main point. If we go back to Xi Jinping's ascension, we remember, Xi Jinping was in Fujian province, which is right across the strait from Taiwan. One of his main things was increasing the engagement, the increasing, the trade with Taiwan, right? And so I think this is a really big point, and I've got some other insights here, but let me go back. I think we have some super chats here. I want to just, call out. So John Lee, if you're still here, thank you for sending that super chat in. I want to make sure I give some, recognition to everybody that's certainly being here tonight. I mean, this is awesome. We've got 1,600 people in the stream, and sorry, I haven't been looking at the comments. I've just been really focused on giving you guys a good stream here and kind of getting my talking points across. But I want people to understand that this is again, one of the things that Ken Hammond said is you look at a lot of these U.S. politicians, they come out with comments that they know are just complete nonsense, and yet they continue to spout them, and deep down inside they know they're nonsense. But again, what it is it goes back to that graph that we showed here, right? And I'm going to show you that one more time, is that 77% of Americans feel that our economic system unfairly favors powerful interests. Now, one of the biggest interests in the United States is, of course, the military industrial complex. And I'm going to bring you up a graph here. I think many of you have seen this before, but this is defense spending in the terms of billions of dollars. Okay. This is, basically from this year. This is April. This is last month, April 2023. This gets updated all the time because it's just shocking how much money we are spending on defense. And there is a proposal now, in the United States Senate to increase spending by 40%, 40% to increase that spending. And again, I mean, you look at, many of these countries, obviously, basically, these are the next 10 countries combined. Obviously, countries 3 through 10 are all, strategic allies of the United States. So, I mean, right now, what basically the United States is saying is, look, we want to go to war with China. We want to go to war with Russia, which we already are because we're funding Ukraine incredibly. I mean, it's just pouring hundreds of millions of tax dollars into Ukraine in that conflict. And so we want to basically take on Russia and China. That's what is happening right now. But I want to go back to the Taiwan thing because this is a really important, and this is something that I really like. So this is from I want you to read the this is a tweet that was sent out. And I want you to read the second one, the one on the bottom there. Okay, this is from Wang Zichen. He's a Chinese commentator, very active on Twitter, very good insights here. But one of the things we often hear is that China's going to invade Taiwan, and they're going to drop bombs on TSMC, which of course is the largest semiconductor manufacturer in the world. And he says, the stupidity from all the nonsense about blowing up TSMC, as if it's relevant to the Chinese mainland's claim of Taiwan, is off the charts and reveals fundamental ignorance. The debate was ludicrous from the day some Naval War College professor invented the term Silicon Shield. And this is what happens. And then we go to Ray Ma. So Ray Ma is up on top, and she's a fantastic tech insider. She's one of the best. I would say she's probably the best China tech insider in the game. She's based in San Francisco. But another fantastic follow on Twitter, so her point is TSMC is a great limitless test for rationality. I used to think it was only wonky political non-tech types who fell for this nonsense. Then so many Silicon Valley and tech folks spouted this with a straight face. I don't correct them. I just mentally deduct 40 IQ points in my estimation of them. So this is the issue is when we are talking about these very complex topics, you need to have the facts and you need to be rational about this. And this is where so many people totally miss the mark. And this is unfortunately one of the pitfalls of the United States foreign policy. And honestly, it goes back to to a long time ago. I'm going to bring. Yeah, this is my absolute favorite book, James Bradley, The China Mirage. This is, in my opinion, the absolute #1 book based on the United States and China relationship. What it goes through is strategically, it goes back to the 1800s and really, how the United States. That's a little aggressive. All right. Basically, it goes back to the 1800s in the United States and essentially how the United States, we completely took advantage of China with the Opium Wars. We went in with the British. We completely manipulated them. The British took Hong Kong. It goes through all of these things, but so it goes through the strategic history. But it talks a tremendous amount about Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong, the Civil War. It talks about Taiwan, and it talks about even in like the 1940s with Roosevelt, how we basically had no insights into China. And so here we are now. Granted, it was a lot tougher back then because, based on communication and things like that. But we would have a, the best one is, I forgot his name. Is it John Simple or John? Forgot the guy's name, but he was a diplomat for the United States. He was born in Chongqing, and he spent time with Mao Zedong. And so he basically went back to the United States and he said, look, I want to talk to you. Like, I was born and raised in China. I speak native level Chinese. I've met with China's government. Like, you guys are thinking that Chiang Kai-shek is going to win this war. Let me tell you what's going on the ground. And basically the US government said, we don't want to hear from you. Who, Mao Zedong? Like, who? This guy's nothing. We're going to destroy him. And it's basically these strategic errors that just led to a very big problem with the United States completely misunderstanding China. If you haven't read this book, it is absolutely the best book that you can possibly read on US-China relations. And what it is history repeats itself. If you do not learn from your mistakes, you are bound to repeat it. And the same fundamental errors. Again, the United States government, we poured hundreds of millions of dollars into backing Chiang Kai-shek, thinking that we could turn China into a democratic Christian nation and basically kind of rule China, knowing that China would be the country that would have the most influence in Asia. That was our blueprint, right? Our blueprint was to control China and then spread our American influence there and then dominate the Asia Pacific region. That was the goal back in the 1940s. That failed tremendously because we didn't understand what was actually happening on the ground in China. So I'm going to bring up this slide here, and this is back to Wang Zechen, who says, the Chinese mainland's claim of Taiwan is rooted in history, not material interests such as chips or technology. The Western mainstream narrative sees Chinese claim of Taiwan as an expansion, an invasion, meaning claiming something not belonging itself, thus easily leading to imagination that the mainland must be after something valuable. And with Taiwan's enormous semiconductor success, chips and TSMC now easily fit into that imagination, which is not how the Chinese mainland approaches the Taiwan question. So again, this is a great example of the kind of what we hear in the United States. We hear things like, well, China's going to invade Taiwan. They want the chips, and therefore they're going to bomb all of the factories in Taiwan. Well, if they want the chips, why would they bomb them, first of all, right? That doesn't make any sense. The second point is as well as that China needs these chips just like everybody else, right? China depends on chips from everywhere, but China's not stupid. There's no reason why why would China just one day all of a sudden start bombing Taiwan? It really doesn't make sense. And it goes back to that insight where I shared here is going back to this tweet where it says the debate was ludicrous from the day some Naval War College professor invented the term silicon shield. Now, this is actually what happens very often in the United States, right? All of a sudden, we have a U.S. general say, "Well, I believe that we're going to be with war in China by 2025," and so now all of a sudden that makes national papers. Hey, China's preparing for war by 2025, but China has said nothing. China has said nothing about that. Where did that source come from? The source comes from a United States general who says, well, basically it's my gut feeling. And it's like, great. So now we're basing our, United States foreign policy decisions off of what some guy thinks. Just a random thought from some general that, hey, we're going to be with China. There's nothing strategic behind this. It's the same thing that happened with the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, there was a Western publication that coined the term debt trap diplomacy. Okay, that was basically published in a think tank. As soon as they said that, all of a sudden, mainstream media, especially in the United States, they jumped on that term, debt trap diplomacy, debt trap diplomacy. Everybody starts, using that phrase, and it basically it just comes off of this, one think tank that published this back in 2016, whatever it was. And so this is what happens: is we often hear a word, we often hear something that is very triggering, and we just jump on that. And again, this is really alarming to me when because all of a sudden the US military general says, well, I have a feeling that we're going to be with war in China within 2 years. Now, all of a sudden, our congressmen say to the Senate, well, hey guys, guess what? We need to increase this. We're going to be at war with China for 2 years. Why don't we go ahead and take this $877 billion? Why don't we bring that up to over $1 trillion? Why don't we bring in more defense contractors? All about the Benjamins. It's all about the money, and that's a really sad thing when you have these interests in here. It's extremely, extremely sad here. I'm going to show you. I've got a couple more slides that I want to bring up here because it's just so important that we are truly understanding exactly what is going on, because this is what's happening in my hometown. All right. So as a result of this, this is the problem that's now happening. Hey, by the way, we just crossed 2,000 people here in the live stream, guys. Thank you so much for being here. But we've looking at this is a new bill that is going back, and it says the blatant discrimination of Ron DeSantis' anti-China housing law. And look at the key headline here. DeSantis wants to beef up his tough on China credentials. The result is a racist law. Now, we're going to go ahead and break down this law here because this is, again, this is what's happening. And this is when I travel in America and I meet with Chinese communities. This is a major concern, what's going on. The bill, which bars many Chinese citizens from buying property in Florida, is the latest in an ongoing state and federal effort from Republican lawmakers to emphasize that they are tough on China as geopolitical and economic tensions have grown between the two countries. All right. But, and let me just take a break here. So that's the main thing that's unfortunately the problem right now in Washington is that, for example, a lot of my fans say, Cyrus, you should run for president. Well, there's no way that I would have a chance at being in type of any political office in the United States because I have a more rational and balanced approach to China. I'm pro-engagement. I'm pro-dialogue. In my opinion, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping should be talking once a quarter. Why not? These are the two most important presidents in the world, right? You have the two biggest, most powerful countries in the world. Why wouldn't you be talking to, if I'm Joe Biden, I want to be talking to Xi Jinping at least once a quarter. That's in my opinion, that's what should be going on. So I'm one that is pro-engagement, pro-dialogue, pro-relationship, figuring out a way to work together. And, that just does not fly in the United States right now. That's just not a popular opinion amongst many people right now, and especially politicians, because they realize that if you are, let's just say I want to propose a bill, okay? And, basically the United States is a very polarized country. Republicans hate Democrats, Democrats hate Republicans, generally speaking. I mean, it's like oil and vinegar. They don't mix. They basically try to block each other on whatever they can do. The one thing that does unite both parties is being anti-China. So if I have a bill to pass, all I need to do is kind of add in a little anti-China element to that bill. It's probably going to get bipartisan support, and I can probably get that bill passed. So that's what's happening in our country. We are seeing that if you want to be a successful politician in the United States, how's your anti-China sentiment? Is it good? Does it need to be increased? That's where we're at right now, which is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting because this is as we continue to go on. Activists, however, fear that that codifies and emboldens racial profiling in the state, making it harder for Chinese immigrants and Asian Americans to buy homes. And if we skip down to the middle, the reality will be that any seller, when they see a Chinese name, will think too much trouble and they'll refuse to sell it. And that says Echo King, a Chinese American attorney based in my hometown, Orlando, Florida. And he has helped organize opposition to this legislation. My community, lots of people are scared. Now, again, if we go down to the bottom paragraph, in Texas, there has been a similar outcry between Asian American and immigrant communities about a bill. And and this is an important point. You can target foreign governments. You can target the foreign Chinese Communist Party, but you have to separate that from the individuals that are already in this country and protected by the Constitution. This is our land too. This is our home too. Now, I'm going to bring this up because this is a common point that many people try to battle me on. They say, well, Cyrus, as an American citizen, you're not able to buy land in China. It basically, why are you saying that this law is bad? The issue is that our two countries, the United States and China, are fundamentally different in how they have been built. The United States is built on immigration. That is the backbone of what being an American is, right? Is that in this land, we're all immigrants, right? My mother is originally from Germany. To this day, she remains a German national. She is a permanent resident alien in the United States. She does not have American citizenship. She's a proud German national, but obviously she is a permanent resident here. She enjoys all of the rights as an American citizen, hence why there's no big need for her to become an American citizen. But for her, she was welcomed. She came here in the 1960s. She immigrated here. My father's side, his grandfather immigrated from Germany. A tremendous amount of Germans in the state of Iowa, all farmers coming to the United States. And that's the difference, right? Our country in America is built on immigration. And the interesting thing is when you look at the amazing Chinese American community. One of my favorite stories is Eric Yuan, who is the CEO and the founder of Zoom, who many of you know. We use this for Zoom calls, obviously experienced a tremendous boom during the pandemic. But Eric Yuan, I mean, he is from Shandong province. It took him 9 times. He was rejected 9 times by immigration, to come to the United States. He eventually succeeded, I believe, on his 10th time. He came to California, studied here, became a naturalized American citizen, founded his huge tech company, obviously a billionaire now, but, has his children born in this country. But all of a sudden, now you're looking at his surname, Eric Yuan. For most Americans, they are not able to distinguish that. And this is a big thing that I have a problem with, is that, again, it goes to the racial profiling. As long as we see somebody that has a Chinese last name, now we're thinking, oh, are you connected to the Chinese government? Are you a spy? What is your connection? I mean, and this is just this very dark road that we're going down. Many of you remember, I went back to New York City. I went to New York City in December of last year. Had an amazing chance to meet with the Chinese American community there. Incredible Chinese American community in New York City. And, I went with a lunch with a number of very prominent, basically businessmen and women that were all very active in New York City, and they wanted to meet with me, and they were just like, they were they were very complimentary. They just said, "Cyrus, thanks for your work, thanks for your efforts, because this is our country too, right? We're all American citizens. We're Chinese. We love China. We love our home country. We love both, right? That's where that's, and we do business between both, right? We're very influential businessmen between New York and China. We have a tremendous amount of guanxi and connections between both countries and places, and that is what has done so well. I mean, the Chinese American community in New York is incredible, and that's where it's very concerning when these laws come through, because, again, our nation is very different. We're built on immigration. We're built on attracting the best talent in the world. That's been the key. That is how the United States has become so powerful, attracting talent from around the world. But the issue as well, I got my kids screaming to get up this morning. So I've got, the issue here is that, there's a large thing that is not understood from many people. And I've got another video clip that I'm going to play for you right now. And this comes from Neil Bush, who is the brother of George Bush. Let's play this for you. Let me just load up this clip for you.
Anytime China can have a positive influence on the world, count me in. I think it's great. I don't see China's being friendly or being of assistance to foreign countries as being any kind of a threat to us or to those countries. And to the extent that there might be bargaining that takes place, countries aren't going to give away their sovereignty to China. China's not seeking to take over countries through soft means. Yeah, I think any big country that wants to help smaller countries, they should be applauded for the good work they're doing. So one example is China's success in bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran, two enemies for many years, to the table to establish normalized relations. That's a very good breakthrough. It shows that China's using its influence in a positive way. That's a good thing for the world. Hopefully it'll be a peace that's sustained over a long period of time. In the meantime, it's a step in the right direction.
All right, so the fantastic clip from this is Neil Bush again. Now, Neil Bush is George Bush's brother. Interesting enough, I mean, he's made some appearances on CGTN. His work is primarily focused on U.S.-China relationship. That's what he does. And I want to take a break here. Let me give 2 shout-outs here. I've got one to Jimmy Yao. Thank you for the awesome little sticker here saying keep it. Harold Sullivan, who says the U.S. deep state wants war with China by 2025. It's the only way to stop BRICS and de-dollarization. The British did the same in 1915. That's a good point, and it's why I bring up BRICS. I mean, this is a thing that I've highlighted in a video. I believe it was last Sunday. If you haven't watched that, go back. You can see that. I mean, you can see there's just some very interesting things that are going on behind the scenes. I remember being on a live stream with Alex from Reporterify Media, the Duran, who many of you like as well, and we talked about the fact that Russia, I mean, they have been stockpiling gold. They have figured out a way to survive. And, basically their foreign reserves at the start of 2022, it dipped, and now it's kind of been replaced back to the same level. I mean, in many ways, this is an interesting thing that we're seeing. And again, it's not me taking a pro-Russian stance. It's me simply looking at facts and simply stating that right now, there's 19 countries around the world, including America's neighbor, Mexico, that want to get into BRICS. BRICS is going to be a very big factor in the future of our world. And it goes back to that very opening clip when I talked about with Ken Hammond. And it's for many years, we've always thought that it's going to be this unipolar world, that the United States is going to lead the world, but it has shifted, and it has shifted to a multipolar world. And I mean, I could share with you just dozens of headlines of countries around the world that are shifting away, that are saying, look, we don't want to just trade exclusively in United States dollars. We've realized there is a geopolitical risk to being 100% exposed to the United States. Basically, anytime you don't agree with us, you can cut us off. You can effectively cut us off from the entire worldwide financial system. So why wouldn't we want to, start doing some trade with some other countries? Now, this is an interesting insight. I'm going to bring up a good point here. Let me bring up this little graph here, and let me find it first. I think it's this one here. Oh, that's not it. Where did it go? I might not have it, actually. I think I forgot to upload it. But basically, it's talking about the world right now. And we look at, for example, it was an interesting article that was talking about, how the West is not really winning in Russia. And the main thing is just because in Russia basically it's invoking this conflict, right? The conflict is continuing to go, whereas most countries around the world, they don't want to be involved in this conflict. And that's where you see, for example, when we say the world is united against Russia, we see the vast majority of countries, including the world's largest democracy, India, not wanting to take a stance on this, basically saying, look, I don't want to be involved in this conflict between, Russia and the United States and Ukraine. At the end of the day, like, we need to trade, and we need to get on. We need to make the best decisions for ourselves. And again, we've seen this now play out in many other worlds as well. French President Macron, when he went to China, I mean, he had a very clear message to the United States that quite frankly did not sit well with American politicians, but basically said, as France, we don't need to be involved in a potential conflict between the United States and China, and most especially over Taiwan. This does not benefit French interest. And of course, the United States does not like hearing that, because, we command respect. We basically, if you're our ally, you follow what we do. We command you to do something, you better be doing it. That's essentially the United States role. I lived in Canada for 5 years. Canada unfortunately has that reputation of being the United States dog, right? We tell you to bark, you bark, and we've seen that play out exactly with the Meng Wanzhou fiasco that absolutely put Canada in a terrible situation between the United States and China, where many Canadians were very frustrated. They simply said, look, again, we're Canada, we're independent. We don't want to be involved in this beef between the United States and China. It was an absolute terrible thing, which, by the way, here's another headline that we see is that, kind of this tit for tat. We see that China expels a Canadian consul in retaliation for Ottawa expelling a Chinese diplomat. And, this is very similar to what happened a few years ago. If you remember, I believe it was the United States. Sorry, it was the United States closed down the Houston Chinese consulate, right? The Chinese consulate in Houston, which, by the way, Houston is the second largest Chinese American community in the United States. So obviously having a Chinese embassy there, a Chinese consulate would have been a very important thing for the Chinese community. They closed that down in retaliation. China went back. And that's often what we see. We see this tit for tat thing. Interesting enough, it's never China that leads it. It's always the United States that always has the first strike. China will always retaliate. That's basically, where we at in this relationship. But I do want to highlight, we're coming up to the end of the stream. We've been about an hour. I like to keep these short and tight just so you guys can get on with your day. But I want to share with you a couple of examples of some Western politicians that do have a more objective and rational view towards China. Now, this is from Australia. I think this is actually, quite interesting. So this is Premier McGowan has labeled Western Australia as a tale of two countries, while reinforcing the strength of the state's relationship with China. So this is something that, is very hard to find in Western media. You have to really go out and try to seek it. But this is, again, something that I want to highlight here, because I think it is a very positive story here, where we see, we are fortunate that the world is after our products, and China is there as a raging successful economy and has a complementary relationship with Western Australia. We want to keep those relationships strong. I know we've gotten criticism for trying to have a harmonious relationship with China, but I think it's in the best interest of Western Australia that we do that. Now, again, this is a very big thing. And basically, what this premier in Western Australia is saying, he's looking at Perth, for example. Perth, obviously, a very big mining town, a lot of coal mining there, a lot of energy. And again, I mean, Australia has benefited tremendously from a relationship with China. And what he's contrasting is he's saying, look, here in Western Australia, we have it's almost a tale of two countries, right? We are having a very strategic, a harmonious relationship with China. We realize that China is our number one trading partner. And as a result of this, we're going to keep that relationship going, quite frankly, because it helps the bottom line of Western Australians, right? This is how our economy and our business is getting done. Meanwhile, when you go to the east, in Eastern Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, these big cities, they are taking a very much more of a hawkish stance against China. Again, I made a video about how the United States sold a China war to Australia. You look at the country of Australia, 25 million people spending $368 billion on nuclear-powered submarines to protect Australia from its number one trading partner, China. There is no way that anybody can rationally explain that. It is beyond the most stupidest deal that I've ever seen in the history of politics, or in politics or geopolitics, whatever you want to call it. There's no rational thinking there. How does the Australian government think that spending $368 billion is going to benefit Australia in the long term? It doesn't. It's a complete waste of money. And the reality is this is how sensationalized and how ridiculous, Western media has become. 1 in 10 Australians now believe that China will attack Australia sometime within the next 3 years. And what I mean attack is physically landing Chinese boats on the Australian coastline and invading Australia. That's what 1 in 10 Australians now believe. That's what a national poll in Australia says. And it's beyond irrational. It's beyond thinking. First of all, what is the purpose of China invading Australia? What would be the point of that? Please, if you have any idea, please let me know in the comments here. Because what's so funny is I had somebody comment, and it's like, what would be easier for China? It would be easier to just buy Australia. For example, if some people have said, China's going to invade Australia because they want access to the coal mines. You know what? It would be a lot easier for China to just go in and buy every single coal mine in Australia. Right. That's a way easier thing for them to do. Again, and there's no track record of this, right? When is the last time that China has launched a war against an independent country and gone in and invaded an independent country? It doesn't happen. On the flip side, what about the United States? We have to be honest about these things. Again, it's not me being anti-American. It's me being pro facts here. This is just, it's just, we have to deal with rational thinking and facts. It's crazy. It's just absolutely insane. But there you go. You have Western Australian Premier saying, look, this is what we're going to be doing. And I'm going to bring up another slide here. This is the one I wanted to show you. Here, I finally found it. So here's let's go back here. This is an article from the Spectator. Why the economic war against Russia has failed. This is a gentleman, Wilhelm Middelkoop. He's from Switzerland originally, I believe. Over 140 countries, whom almost all have China as its greatest trading partner, didn't want economic war. Over 6 billion people live in these 140 countries. Do we still think the West is winning? Even if we win in Ukraine, we lost the current world order and some more. So this is kind of the interesting thing that I like to observe. I'm a YouTuber that makes geopolitical content because I'm observing what's going on. And it's a fascinating world that we live in because, again, here in the United States, we live in a bubble, right? When we say, the world is united against Russia, I'm not taking a pro-Russia stance. I am 100% against what Vladimir Putin did and, this conflict. It's a tragedy. But in every single way, we should be trying everything we can to promote a ceasefire and getting this result. And again, this is where you go back to the comments of Neil Bush there that I just shared with you when he said, look at what's happening here, right? Look at, China. Look at what they're doing. This Iran-Saudi peace deal is a major deal. I mean, basically within, and that deal started with China visiting Saudi Arabia back in November, December last year. So let's just say in the span of 6 months, China has been able to accomplish much more in the Middle East than the United States did in 20 years. I mean, what have we done? I mean, we've launched 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Both have been an absolute failure. Both have cost the United States government and more importantly, tax-paying citizens like myself trillions of dollars in taxes for what? Right? We spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan replacing the Taliban with the Taliban. I mean, it's the most epic failure in the history of war. And this is why I'm so anti-war, because the United States wants to go to war with China. We are provoking, we are doing things that is raising these tensions. The problem is there is no track record that indicates we would even have a chance at winning this war. I mean, if we can't beat Afghanistan, how the heck are we going to compete with China in a war? I mean, China is a heck of a lot stronger than Afghanistan. But again, let's go back to some stories of people that are having a more objective and rational view towards China. This is from one of my absolute favorite follows on Twitter, Frenchman Arnois Bertrand. If you have not followed him, please go follow him on Twitter. Fantastic follow. But here's the former head of the UK Foreign Office. We should not make an enemy of China. This, for me, would be a breakpoint between London and Washington. So again, these are our strategic allies. You look at France, Macron, him going to Beijing, meeting with Xi Jinping, and simply sending a message to the United States saying, we are not going to be involved in a conflict between you and China over Taiwan. That does not suit French interests. And it's time for us to act in our best interest as Europeans. Here we go. This is the former head of the UK Foreign Office, United Kingdom, absolutely strategic ally of the United States, saying this would be a breaking point between London and Washington if you're going to make an enemy out of China. Let's continue with his. He says, I also believe that Britain has no business sending aircraft carriers halfway across the world in a bid to be a player in the Indo-Pacific, which he characterizes as American-led and American interests are not our own. He also expresses regrets the UK has caught up in the US's wars. So many people died for what purpose? Britain, he believes, waged war at the vast expense for no benefit. The same would apply to the UK and Europe for joining the US's war on China. Time to think for themselves. Guys, this is what we are seeing with our strategic allies in the United States, is that our allies are starting to shift away. Now, obviously, the UK and France, they're going to continue to be a US ally. But it's the same thing that I really told when I was in Canada, and I just said, look, I'm an American living in Canada, but as Canadians, you guys better have your own policy. You cannot blindly follow the United States into every single thing. And at the end of the day, for example, you look at this Meng Wanzhou case. Now, many of you who have been longtime followers of the case, many of you know Alex from Reporterfy Media, myself. We were so involved in that case because it was a fascinating thing. Alex is, of course, Canadian. Many of you know my whole family is Canadian. My wife and my 3 children are also Canadian citizens. I was living on the ground in Vancouver at the time. What's so funny is a lot of the anti-China YouTubers as well. They were like, "Oh, look at Cyrus. He's sent from the communist government to go cover the Meng Wanzhou trial." Interesting enough, I was in Canada probably 2 years before Meng Wanzhou ever touched ground there. But nonetheless, the reason why I covered that is because I lived in Vancouver, and the public could simply walk in to the courthouse there in British Columbia, and you're seeing Meng Wanzhou, a huge profile person from China. Basically, there's a battle between the United States and China going on in the background and in the courtroom in Vancouver, Canada. And what was fascinating about this case is from the beginning, the United States had nothing. I mean, and the interesting thing is we brought in, the top lawyer I interviewed. I believe, what's his name? Richard. Alex, help me out if you're on the stream. I forgot his name, but we brought in the top immigration lawyer that was top lawyer that, not immigration lawyer, but it's basically a top lawyer that was covering this case. And he said, hey, there's no way that the United States has anything on this. I mean, they're basically going to have to drop these charges. And the problem is, Justin Trudeau had that ability. He had that ability. A lot of people say, hey, what about the 2 Michaels that were there? Again, this is this tit for tat thing, right? If the United States is going to capture a Chinese national, certainly a high profile one, which Donald Trump said, he basically came out and said, look, we're going to basically use this as leverage in a trade war against China. you can't do stuff like that. It was a disaster for Canada. It was a very, very, very low point for Canada. And it's something where, Justin Trudeau had the ability to, immediately resolve that as the prime minister. He could have said, look, we don't want to be involved in this. And he could have gone to the leveraging table a lot quicker. Eventually, as the evidence showed, I mean, there was nothing that the United States had. She went, she basically went, free. And Richard Curlin, thank you, buddy. Thank you, Alex, for being here. Big shout out to Alex from Reporterify Media. He's been here from the beginning, doing some modifying. Obviously, I think many of you follow Alex. So if you haven't followed him, of course, check out his channel. Alex and I we've got some amazing interviews lined up. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some potential interviews that we have. We've got some fireball guests in the pipeline for our Let's Talk China show. Basically, we've got a lot of exciting things coming up here, guys. So I'm really excited, for the future of this channel. And why don't we just go ahead and let me just see if I've got anything else. But that's what I'm going to end with. This one is I'm going to end here, and this is a really important one. This is a article written from David Goldman, who basically says, there was a book written from Kevin Rudd, who is the former prime minister from Australia, fantastic China insider. And he says the avoidable war, but basically avoiding war with China is the most urgent task of our lifetime. It depends on how you say. I mean, you could say that from the Chinese perspective, avoiding war with America is the most urgent task of our lifetime. People that really understand what's going on in the world, they understand exactly what we need to be doing for the future of humanity. And that is that we need to be finding a way for peace. We need to be finding a way for cooperation. And the United States and China, they have to find a way to work together. That is the bottom line. And again, it goes back to these comments of, you can immediately start to write off people when they say, comments like this, where it's just like, this stupidity from all of this nonsense of China blowing up the TSMC. As soon as you say comments like this, you realize how little these people have an insight into what's really happening on the ground in China. And that's where we need to have a little bit more rational thinking. We need to have people that have experience on the ground. And basically, that is where I want to, end today's live stream. But I want to be also going to give you guys a little bit of a preview here because, we've got amazing people, over 2,100 people in the live stream today. Thank you guys for being here tonight and talking about the future of the U.S.-China relations. I said pretty much everything that I had laid out. There's a couple other points that I want to say. And that is the fact that I have an opportunity to go back to China. And I'm super excited because many of you know that I started this channel around the pandemic, in early 2020. I was living in Canada. We were locked down. I wanted to do something. And I saw the United States-China relationship, deteriorating back then. And of course, I said, look, I have experience. I have experience in China. I have a different perspective. I want to put my name out there, and I want to be someone that's fighting for peace and fighting for a better world. And let's start a YouTube channel. Let's start to make a difference here. And over the last 3 years, many of you have been on this journey with me from the beginning. I'm very grateful for all of you being here. And I'm very excited to announce that next month, I will be returning back to China for the first time in about 3.5 years. So my last trip to China was September 2019. Very great news is that anybody who has a 10-year multiple entry visa, those visas have now been reinstated by the Chinese government. So I now have a valid visa to go back to China. And I'm going to be going back in June. And I'm very excited because I have a project that I'm going to be working on. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a preview. Basically, it is a European owner that owns an amazing factory in China. And he's been a longtime fan of the channel. And he said, Cyrus, what I want you to do is I want you to come to the small town that I'm at. I'm one of the only European factory owners in China. And what I want to do is I want to showcase what we're doing on the ground here in China. I want you to make some videos about our journey, about my China journey, and I want you to kind of show how, as a European, we're building relationships with Chinese and how we are doing some amazing things in this industry. So he has invited me out to China. I want to clear the air because sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm sure you've been invited by the Chinese government. You're probably being paid by China." No, I'm actually not. I'm actually working with a foreign national who is a factory owner in China. And again, I'm gonna basically go over there and we're gonna be shooting some amazing content in China. And it's going to be the first time since I've had this YouTube channel that I'm going to be on the ground in China. Now, the other thing that's exciting is we've got Alex from Reportify Media. He's in the stream here tonight. And Alex is going to be meeting me in China. We're going to have a very special show for you. We're going to be doing a Let's Talk China show. It's going to be live from Shanghai. We're going to be sharing more details on that as it comes, but you can expect an amazing, incredible live stream from Shanghai. I'm going to have an action-packed time. Now, I'm going to be in China for about a week. I'm not going to go for long because, as many of you know, I have 3 children. This is actually the first time that I'm going to be leaving my children for more than about 3 days. So I'm going to be gone for about 8 days in China. But when I travel solo, I travel very aggressively. So I'm actually going to be going to about 4 cities in China. I'm going to be going nonstop. I'm going to have so much adrenaline because I'm just so excited to be on the ground in China. And what's exciting is I'm going to be recording so much content for us on this channel, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing street interviews. I'm going to be going out at midnight, just talking to people. I'm going to, probably going to be jet lagged. I'm going to just say, hey, let's see what's going on in China at midnight. Let's go talk to people on the streets. Let's go ask them, are you optimistic about the next 5 years? What is your view of China? How do you view America right now? Let's get some perspective from the local Chinese on what's going on. And let me show you guys what's really China like right now. Because, unfortunately, one of the biggest problems with the pandemic is that China was essentially closed off for the past 3 years. And because people don't have access to China, it becomes this faraway land that we can't really understand, and that many people have a very negative impression of. So my goal with this is I want to go to restaurants and talk with people. I want to show you what life is really like in China, and just be very real. Many of you who follow my content, that I have very strategically produced videos about geopolitics, right? I do a tremendous amount of research. I write very detailed scripts. I'm constantly referencing graphs, and it's going to be a point where I'm going to have very different content where it's going to be a little bit more real. You're going to see the real Cyrus, just kind of traveling. I'm going to take a first class train ride, and I'm going to document that. Like, what's it really like living in China? I'm going to talk to the train conductor. I'm going to talk to the people in the restaurant, and the nice thing is I'm going to be able to, practice my Chinese and, really be able to speak a lot of Chinese on the trip. And we're going to showcase a very real China to you, and kind of, what's China like? What's China really like in 2023? With the hope that we can really give that insight and really show people like, wow, China is a lot different than what I saw, than what I believed it was like. And I already have my whole community of friends here in the United States. Everybody knows I'm going back to China, and they're like, wow, Cyrus, we're really looking forward to, seeing, what China's like, through your lens, through your camera lens. So guys, we've got some fire content that's going to be coming out soon. I'm in just under 3 weeks. I'll be on a plane, not a direct flight, but I'll be on a plane to China. So look forward to that. We've got the Let's Talk China show with Alex, which is going to be super exciting. So everybody, I'm going to open it up. Let's just see if there's anything in the comments there. Thank you, Alex, for being here again. As the moderator here, I see a lot of comments there. Cyrus, good for you. We're going to see Cyrus the human. Yes, you will. You're going to see me just more casual. I'm not a street vlogger, right? That's what I meant. Is I'm not somebody that just kind of does walk and talks, things like that. I'm somebody that we produce really nice geopolitical videos, but I'm going to show you guys a little bit more casual things. Something like what's it like eating at a restaurant in China? Let's go out at midnight. Let's go eat some street food. Let's go talk to the vendors. Let's go see what's the real China look like. So I love these. Genghis Khan, truth always prevails. A lot of questions, guys. I do live in America right now. Many people asking, where I live right now. So we're going to go ahead and do the outro here. Thank you guys for all your amazing support. I got my kids are up right now. We're going to go ahead and get this party started. So guys, thank you guys for a wonderful stream. I appreciate all of your amazing support. As always, let's end it with a little show ending here from Alex. And guys, we're going to see you in a new video very soon.